Hello friends, welcome to Ukraine. We're here to see helicopters. I've been fighting for 2 years for this video. Look, there it is, it's the Mi-8. What do you think?
That's it, yes.
It's not pretty, but I'm a little excited. The journey begins in the cockpit of the Mi-8, a helicopter from the 1970s with over 2,000 flight hours logged. All around me, well, obviously, the least you can say is that it's old. Nevertheless, they've been modernized. There's a version with the Motor 6 engine that allows for greater efficiency, and above all, it makes maintenance easier. Which the Russians don't necessarily have, since the engines, even for the Russians, come from Ukraine. So here they have the necessary maintenance. The improvements in this area allow for better average availability compared to the Russians on the other side. In terms of equipment, around me, you can see there are the famous ever-present fans to cool the pilots. In terms of avionics, everything necessary is available. You have 2 garments for global positioning system navigation, which are also used in civilian aviation. So you don't need much more than that to fire. Here you lift this, and then it will be able to release the rockets, which we'll go see right after the 8. Basically, it's a heavy transport helicopter, which means in the back we have 24 people. It's huge. It's capable of transporting several tons of equipment over several hundred kilometers. It goes at 270 kilometers per hour. He had an excellent reputation, especially in the war between the Soviet Union and Afghanistan, in which he earned the nickname Terminator. The Mujahideen couldn't shoot down the aircraft. Even with 12.7 caliber weapons, it managed to keep flying when fired upon. So very resilient, very easy to maintain. Basically, it's rugged. It's kind of like the 2 chevaux vapeur of helicopters. Since it worked well, they sold it, believe it or not. Produced in 18,000 units, exported to 80 countries. The Mi-8P has civilian versions, including ones for firefighting, a presidential version, and a very important person version. And then it was reinforced to simply be more. A tactical transport helicopter can be converted into a dedicated combat version. Between the classic Mi-8 and the Mi-17, which are in fact the same helicopter, which one is better? The pilots here know how to fly both. Well, you also have intermediate versions, meaning that here in the center you're going to have cannons. That is a cannon to be able, for example, to shoot at what's around us. Currently, they're mainly used to take down Shahed kamikaze drones, as these drones fly at similar speeds to helicopters. So they're going to follow it, they'll be able to shoot at it. And then you have another option on this one, which isn't equipped. At the back, you have windows that can be opened, and here you have the base where you open the window. And during the flight, we'll be able to place our machine gun or cannon here and fire outside. In fact, they even open it directly, as we lack a front cannon, unlike some other Mi-8 variants. And do you remember our friend Frank the sniper, the sharpshooter? He had a mission requiring him to go very quickly in the Donbass, if I recall correctly. In fact, he was sent back urgently. They needed reinforcements with solid gas, and he was transported by helicopter. So remember, it's a helicopter that does medical evacuation missions and tactical transport. We have a winch on the side that allows us to lift and lower heavy loads. It handles logistics. It allows us to quickly bring equipment just about anywhere. It's really a very efficient helicopter. Ukraine's allies also supplied the country with several dozen units of the equipment. And that's why today, not only do they have Ukrainian helicopters, like this model here, which dates back to the 70s, but is still used today, they also have models from their allies. So we don't have an exact number, but there are at least about 50 Mi-8 and Mi-17 helicopters that are currently operational in the Ukrainian army. In terms of piloting, of course, the Ukrainians have started flying at night, obviously using night vision goggles. They have the latest equipment to be able to operate in all conditions, day or night, with or without visibility. So a helicopter that has two pilots, and in the middle, a flight engineer or mechanic, whatever you want to call them. So did you see when it landed earlier at first, before completely stopping the rotors? One of the men got out to check the clearance before the vehicle fully settled on the ground. He wanted to make sure there wasn't a rock or something, so he got out, he checked that there wasn't a rock. And it's only once we're sure that by going down another 50 centimeters nothing will break, that's when they can actually stop the rotors. The helicopter is 18 meters long, the blades are 21 meters wide, and it's capable of carrying 4 tons or 18 fully equipped commandos in the back. So just a little story. This t-shirt, Mission Mariupol, involved helicopters that at the beginning of the war attempted to reach the surrounded city of Mariupol. They were heroes in Azovstal and they needed support. And so here it's just by chance. I wore this t-shirt because I knew I would see helicopters, but the commander of that helicopter was one of the pilots who handled that logistics. By going directly to Mariupol to bring equipment to evacuate Ukrainians who were wounded on the ground. And so thanks to them, they were able to survive for weeks and weeks. Until the surrender of Mariupol, its soldiers are being tortured and some killed. The missions ended when 2 helicopters were shot down, but they completed dozens of missions before that, which had a very important strategic effect. They really saved a lot of comrades during those missions. We're going to go to the back to check out the flares, because every time my helicopter goes on a loft firing mission, it's going to release the decoys. So it's ejected from here. In terms of tactical progression, to fly below the radars, they fly at 1 meter altitude, 1 meter altitude. Last week, so here, we're filming this video at the beginning of June, I shouldn't tell you exactly. In Kharkiv, they carried out a mission in which they were with another type of helicopter, a Black Hawk. They went behind enemy lines, landed on the other side of the river at Skil to drop off commandos who went on missions, and then they picked everyone up again and went back the other way. The objective was to prevent the proper functioning of logistics to the front. And so these are missions that are extremely dangerous, missions behind enemy lines. It continues to exist despite the density of the air defense. There's also the challenge with drones, as more of them fly around somewhat randomly, capturing high altitude observations. They launch kamikaze drones in an attempt to crash into you. When you go back here, there's a little feature, it opens up, meaning that you can hear spread it apart, and then you're able to take out much larger things. And today there are people here specifically to check the possibility of taking out drones with a cannon on them. That means at the front you have the commandos, at the back it opens up, you have the drone that's going to go do its missions with its cannon, and then the helicopter takes off again in a few minutes once everyone has been dropped off. The rocket pods that are used for the so-called loft shots, whose effectiveness I still doubt, but basically you should know that these loft shots make it possible. We managed to get relatively far from the front by flying at an extremely low altitude, just a few dozen centimeters above the fields. They reach a predetermined spot based on wind, altitude, trajectory and target, set themselves at a predefined angle and launch. And actually it lands on the equivalent of a soccer field. And so you end up with a few dozen rockets that will fall on an area where you know there are targets to hit. So on the other side, the helicopter, when it makes its maneuver, it climbs, makes its turn, goes back to the other side and releases its flares. As a precaution, a heat-seeking Stinger surface-to-air missile is fired at the target, heading directly towards it, and then it goes back at a very low altitude to the other side. I still told you about the remarkable things regarding the Mi-8. We can share a few brief war stories, such as those from the conflict against the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. I have some time before they take off, so I'll share a few stories about facing the Mujahideen. There was a helicopter, its engine on fire, under enemy fire, being shot at. So there are 2 engines inside and one of them was on fire. He was still able to continue his evacuation mission. Another little story with the Turks. This time there was, you remember the Sukhoi 24, which was shot down by an F-16 back then in Syria. So there were Russians in the area. The Russian Sukhoi 24 plane had entered Turkish airspace. The Turks shot it down within seconds, and it was a Mi-8 helicopter that came to retrieve the crew. The Mi-8 helicopter was shot down by the Syrian rebels, and so another Mi-8 helicopter arrived afterwards, so they could fire rockets at it to prevent them from recovering the wreckage and turning it into trophies. Did you know that the Mi-8 almost never existed? Nikita Khrushchev, who was the president of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics Supreme Commander, he simply believed that in the context of a nuclear war, which was expected at the time, helicopters were heavy, expensive, and would result in too many losses. So he ordered the project to be stopped, but Miller managed to get around all that a little bit. They presented it as an evolution of the Mi-4, pretending it was from the 50s. We're talking... And so he was able to make his first test flight in 1961, and when Khrushchev later on fell from power, a little bit later in 1964. Well, it was too late to stop the program, so the program was launched and they produced 17,000 of them. It's the most produced helicopter of all time and the most exported. 80 countries operate it and use it for many different types of missions. By the way, I'll show you one last little thing. We go underneath, we don't risk bumping into anything, and here you have the winch. We're going to carry people underneath. Crazy stuff. We just saw a Mi-24 that passed by in the distance. So there are Mi-8, Mi-24 and Mi-17. They're not the same or synchronized units. Still, it's impressive to me. So there's also a little story about the outfit, because, you know, it's a helicopter that's particularly poorly insulated against heat and cold. Thus, they dressed as Siberian peasants. In the 1960s and 1970s, they went on missions at minus 30 degrees Celsius, climbing to 4,000 meters altitude. The helicopter is rugged, capable of operating in extreme temperatures from very hot to very cold. And there was an anecdote in the 1990s when they started working with NATO, when we expanded, when we began to integrate countries into NATO that had Mi-8s. So some of them were modernized. That's why the cockpits are not all the same. Actually, the helicopter arrived and the guys got out of the helicopter dressed in peasant overalls, which didn't match at all the standards of the time. And the Mi-8 pilots were a little bit offended that people were making fun of their outfits. So what they did was they took off again and went to do a precision landing, hold on crosswind, in conditions that NATO pilots didn't dare to attempt, because they, with their system that was... They were demonstrating their mastery of their aircraft, which lacked modern systems like fly-by-wire. These pilots, some of whom have... In general, they fly missions nearly every other day. Last month, they only flew about 15 hours, but there are months when they fly more than 50 hours, so it's still a very high level of intensity. The pilots here, there's one, the experienced one, and the young patriot, who only has 3 years of experience and was just finishing school when the war started. From 2014 he enlisted precisely because he saw himself as a pilot. They have their own schools, helicopters, and some of the world's most experienced men. And there are some missions that I'm not eager to talk to you about, but there are some outside of transport and tactical missions. They actually carry out missions deep inside Russia, but most of the missions are still loft-firing missions. And among the crews, there's also shooting against Shahed kamikaze drones. Friends, we had a unique chance to see these helicopters. I hope next time they'll let me fly. That's what they promised me. On a strategic transport mission, tactical transport, between the rear and the front lines. Why not? There could be a spot for me in these helicopters. We know there's room, so stay tuned. The channel, and I'm waiting for them to call me back for the next video.
Guys, we
are lucky to be inside for the startup. I'll go down afterwards.
Here we go.
hope you enjoyed it. It was awesome and brought me to tears. There was a bit of wind, guys. Subscribe, we'll make more similar videos. They're going on a mission to shoot some Chehet tonight, but I'm unsure of their plans. What a thrill, guys, what a thrill. I lost there, incredible.